All, this is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So the discussion today, both discussions, this one and the chit chat, are going to be really fascinating. In the chit chat, I'm going to discuss the discussion we had this morning about the long haulers. And this discussion now, we would discuss about a paper from UK. Credit goes to Dr. Tina Pierce. She actually shared that paper during the discussion this morning, which this paper, the scientists discussed that the markers for severe case of a COVID or long hauling can actually be identified early on with the symptoms or even before the symptoms. So I wanted to give us a taste of that paper. I'm going to go over the markers later on in the next week and actually discuss the markers. But there are some things that we cool beans have discussed already and are aware of them. Interestingly, those are becoming the research as well. So let's look at the research together. And everybody, welcome. So fascinating studies today. I think you would enjoy it. So this is drbeen.com. This is the preprint of the study that I'm talking about that Dr. Tina Pierce sent in. They say delayed bystander CD8 T cell activation, early immune pathology, and persistent dysregulation characterizes severe COVID-19. So I'll explain what they are talking about. And here is the paper. This is an article based on their paper, and then they have their PDF as well that I would discuss in detail next week. I also wanted to share a different concept here as well, and that is the leprosy. So in leprosy, we believe that the immune system incorrectly responds to the Mycobacterium leprae, and the result is that the person becomes lepromatous. So here is a study in which the authors say, we found that live Mycobacterium leprae infected macrophages. Macrophages. Keep an eye on this one, macrophages, because we're going to discuss a little more of that. Polarized towards regulatory M2 type, which I would discuss in a second, preferentially primed T regulatory responses and down-regulated T helper 1 and cytotoxic T cell response. So in summary, the things that we have been discussing, that COVID we have seen is asymptomatic in two cases. In two cases, there may be much more, but the two cases are the ones that we have seen in studies. Can any cool bean tell me what are the two cases in which the COVID is asymptomatic or very mild symptoms? Two immune mechanisms. One of those is over here. So if I can spill the beans, we know that in children, NK cells are more. And in those adults that have more NK cells, they also perform better with the COVID. Secondly, we also know, we have done this study about 8 or 9 months ago, that if the cytotoxic T cytotoxic pathway is taken or T helper 1 pathway is taken, then the person recovers with better outcomes. Here you're seeing that in leprosy, instead of sending the immune pathway towards T helper 1 pathway and cytotoxic, immune system incorrectly goes towards the, let's say, antibody pathway or T helper 2, and that causes the disease. So with this, I'm going to, and all of these links are present. Here is the Discord server that is continuing on, so very good. And I believe that France and Bonk Bonk are working on some parts of it. So thank you very much for that. And finally, let's have our discussion. So I'm just going to quickly start turned out my drawing board is not started. So 1 second. So while we are waiting for the drawing board to load, I want to show you something funny, which my wife has not yet found out. And then when she will find out, she'll be a little upset. So let me show you. I should have done this earlier, and it looks like so. Give me 1 second. I think I have the wrong file. Okay, so while this is happening, I want to show you this. Let me stop sharing for a second. So this little jar, do you see that the plant is in it? So this jar was here with this much of water, and it had plants sprouting out of it. There are a couple of more plants over here as well. And this is Luffy. He has thrown some things out, and the remaining he's thrown inside. And now he's gonna get it from Hina, my wife. So this is the kind of things he does to get in trouble. So back here. So gifts for humanity, continuing, sorry for the delay. Here is what the study is talking about. Let's have our, let's get our bearings. So we know that there is an innate arm, correct? And the innate arm, the cells that we are concerned with are natural killer cell, dendritic cell, macrophages, neutrophils, and other proteins. Today, we'll talk more about dendritic cell, macrophages, and NK cells. The innate arm's function is to non-specifically but immediately start responding to foreign antigens. We know that as well. And one outcome of that is that the naive T cells or the adaptive arm T cell is engaged with the dendritic cell or macrophages. Then there is co-stimulation, hugs and kisses occur, and the result is that the naive T cell either goes T helper 2 pathway or goes T helper 1 pathway as well. I'm repeating, I know that you know all of this. And then T helper 2 will further cause B cell to become a plasma cell. Plasma cell will make antibodies, and that is the antibody pathway. If the naive T cell becomes a T helper 1 cells, and that happens in the presence of interleukin 12, then the T helper 1 cell would activate cytotoxic T cells. So the researchers are saying that someone who responds early on with cytotoxic T cells, they usually have asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic disease. They usually do not end up in a hospital. They usually do not have severe COVID, and they usually do not have long COVID. And those who either spend too much time on the innate arm, either they spend too much time fighting with the virus using the innate arm, and their adaptive arm is not engaged quick enough, or if the adaptive arm is engaged, it goes T helper 2 pathway, they have more symptoms, possibility of severe symptoms, possibility of long COVID. That is a summary of this. This is the whole paper. So in one diagram, if you see here, in this study of 207 SARS-CoV-2 infected individuals with a range of severities followed over 12 weeks from symptoms onset, we demonstrate that an early, robust bystander CD8 positive T cell immune response without systemic inflammation is characteristic of asymptomatic or mild disease. They have a PDF, and I believe that in that PDF there is a lot of markers as well that we want to discuss, but I wanted to share this one. Now I want to then connect this, if you allow me. Let's just look at their findings for one more second here. So this is the immune system map, correct? In this map, if somebody goes cytotoxic pathway, then they are mildly, not even mildly, they are asymptomatically going to manage the situation. The paper misses one thing, and that is the NK cells. NK cells, if they engage on the innate arm, they are robust against the COVID. And we know that from children. And if the NK cells are robust in adults as well, I believe they also have milder symptoms. And how do we get the NK cells? We have done this discussion many times. One should relax, forest, plants, the plants that Luffy destroys over here, all of those things, relaxation, yoga, that help improve NK cell, or generally less stress, less stress hormones will allow NK cells to bounce up. And then there are diets and there are foods and there are other ways to have NK cells increase as well. But the first thing, NK cell based response is good. Second thing, cytotoxic T cell based response is good. Now, the bad part, if too much of innate arm is activated, especially macrophages and dendritic cell, that would convert into macrophage activation syndrome, and that can cause long COVID and that can cause severe COVID. If too much of this pathway is activated, then that would also cause severe, can cause, not also, can cause severe or long. Now, I want to add one more thing, and we have been talking about macrophage mast cell activation syndrome. So the mast cell activation syndrome also is a path that is this path, that is T helper 2 path. Although mast cell directly do not have anything to do with the T helper 2 pathway's establishment or function, but we know that mast cell will not function until they are primed by antibodies against some specific antigen. For example, if somebody is allergic to something, that allergy is manifested when the mast cells have gotten the antibodies launched on them or fixed on them against that antigen. So let's talk about peanuts. So let's say if I am allergic to peanuts, which I'm not. Let's say if I'm allergic to peanuts, I take peanuts, my body develops antibodies, which would be through this pathway, B cell pathway. My body develops antibodies. Those antibodies get lodged on a mast cell. Then when I eat peanuts again, and those antigens come and attach with the antibodies on the mast cell would now independently degranulate and mast cell activation would occur. This is one way of the activation. Mast cells, if you can see the expression here, they're just upset for every single thing. They're like really moody. So they can become upset with the mechanical changes, with the water, on our skin, with the temperature changes, with heat, and so on. So it's not necessary that they are always only attached to the antibody and they are activated that way. However, in cases of infections, when they become degranulated, one of the reasons is priming of the mast cell with the antibodies. So if you think about it, in the pathologies, severe pathologies and long haul, this pathway has all the components that allow various pathologies to occur. Mast cell activation is on this pathway. Antibody production is on this pathway. And then the other pathways are better. So this is the basic discussion for what they have found out. What they found out is T helper 1 pathway is better for our immune system. Now, the question to answer is going to be that, number one, and they asked this question as well in this article, they say, fine, now that we can figure it out in the beginning, that where is the immune system leaning, how do we then prevent immune system to go bad? And I think one of the answers is going to be steroids. Steroids indiscriminately would kind of suppress the immune system. So if that means if someone has a propensity towards long COVID or towards the severe COVID in the beginning of the COVID, then steroids will be very, very useful. And this is what I feel amazed that doctors in India and Pakistan have been saying that, hey, very beginning, we start giving the steroids and some other therapies and we are done in 5 days. So that may be because they kind of suppress the immune system to not go too much towards the B cell. And that helps as well. So this is the discussion. I'm going to stop this one and then I'm going to come back for a chit chat and we will talk more about the long haul discussion that we had today. I had one more point here. Yes, so there was one more point that I thought I needed to discuss. And that was in the study as well. And that is abnormal immune cells. Abnormal immune cells is something that I have been talking about for some days now, not some days, some weeks, months, to a point where there is a cool bean, there was a cool bean who used to become very upset with me that why do I say that the immune cells can become abnormal, and they would only be abnormal if and only if there is a virus that is persisting in the body. Eventually, she stopped joining us. But there was a cool bean, I remember very clearly, who used to become very upset about this. But here it is. Today we have that research paper. What happens is, let's say this is a stem cell. The definition of a stem cell is a cell that can make other cells. For, let's say this cell is making a macrophage, and the stem cell can make its own kind as well. That is the definition of a stem cell. When we are under stress with an infection, our body is ordering a lot of immune system cells to be produced. So we are producing a lot of WBCs, we are producing a lot of macrophages, we're producing a lot of natural killer cells, T cells, B cells. So production of these cells have increased. When the production of these cells have increased, there are two important things to keep in mind. One is the stem cells are continuously replicating, they're continuously dividing. Secondly, these cells, for example, B cell or T cell, they themselves can proliferate as well and make their own copies too. Now, in this whole process, it is possible that when these cells are becoming generated and they are having their genes opened up, when a cell does a specific function, the DNA in the cell has certain genes that open up to perform that function. For example, if the cell is going to make cytokines, then the cytokine genes will open up and allow the cytokine messenger RNA to be formed. That would allow the cytokines to be formed, and so on. So when we continuously make such cells, then there are going to be some such cells that are going to hang around, regardless of if the virus is present or not. This is called virus hit and run. Virus is gone, the immune system is still going mad, and it would continue to go mad for some more time, and then it would calm down. So the researcher found that out as well, that it is possible that the immune system, somewhere over here, the immune system, they call them abnormal immune system cells. They continue to work for longer period of time. So let me actually find that here. So here, the team found that profound alterations in many immune cell types often persisted for weeks or even months after SARS-CoV-2 infection, often persisted weeks or even months beyond the infection. And these problems resolve themselves very differently depending on the type of immune cell that has become abnormal, and that is what they're calling long COVID. So my suspicion for this mechanism was correct. And finally, one more thing that they found was the researchers found no evidence of a relationship between viral load and progression to inflammatory disease. So this has been a very common question here in YouTube and other channels to my videos, that, hey, is there a relationship of viral load in the beginning to the severity? So there is no viral load. So here, progression to inflammatory disease is not related to the viral load. However, once inflammatory disease was established, viral load was associated with subsequent outcomes. So if the the cytokine storm has started and the virus load is also increased at that time or in a greater amount, then the immune system becomes too much mad as well. So these are some very fascinating outcomes in this study, although I believe they miss the natural killer cell part, and the rest seems good. So this is the discussion. Thank you very much for listening in. Please like, subscribe, and share. Like at least. And then if you would like to support this work as well, please, there are 3 links in the description. One is, if you don't want to use PayPal, you can just buy me coffees. They don't use PayPal. Or you can become a patron, or you can support this channel via PayPal as well. So thank you very much. And I'm going to see you in a few minutes and talk about long haul discussion that we had.